There we go. Okay, sorry about that little delay. Okay, so we have all of this. You're starting to get a sense of what's going on with pleasure and pain. And Aristotle just has a couple other things that he wants to bring out for us. So the first is, he makes this distinction between proper pleasures and alien pleasures. Okay. So this is where Aristotle's talking about there's lots of different kinds of pleasure. Right? As we were talking about at the beginning, there's lots of different things that are pleasant. There's a lot of different things that give us pleasure. And because of that, there's lots of different types of pleasure. There's pleasures of feel, pleasures of taste, pleasures of touch, pleasures of thought. And even within those categories, there's other different variations and gradations of pleasure, right? There's lots of different types of pleasure. And each pleasure is bound up with whatever it completes. So when I'm getting pleasure from hearing a song, that's the pleasure proper to that song, right? I'm getting pleasure as the completion of that activity that I'm engaging in. But if I receive pleasure from something outside of the activity that I'm engaged in, that's what we would call an alien pleasure. And we'll give Aristotle's example here because it's one of these of my favorite, I like all these weird examples that Aristotle gives. So we'll get to that in a second. But the idea is that proper pleasures intensify the activity. Right? They make you want to do it more. They motivate you. The example that Aristotle gives is if you enjoy doing geometry, you'll be a better geometer. That might not be that relatable, but think about, hopefully the major that you've chosen, the career path you hope to go down, is something that gives you pleasure. Because if you receive a lot of pain from the work that you've chosen for the rest of your life, you're not going to be as good at it as something that brings you pleasure, right? The stuff that makes us feel good while we're doing it motivates us to do more of it, right? And we can think about this with hobbies that we like, hopefully with our careers, with lots of different things. Now, alien pleasures, instead of assisting or motivating or intensifying the activity, they hinder the activity. They slow it down, right? They make you distracted. They pull you away from it. And the example that Aristotle gives, which is really relatable other than just the type of music that he's talking about. So on marginal page 1175b, that's like 4 through 10. So it's book 10, chapter 3. He says, this is even more apparent from the way some activities are impeded by pleasures from others. For lovers of flutes, for instance, cannot pay attention to a conversation if they catch the sound of someone playing the flute, because they enjoy flute playing more than their present activity. And so the pleasure proper to the flute playing destroys the activity of the conversation. So you can imagine you're out on campus, you're talking with your friends, you're having a really nice conversation, but you just love flutes, right? Like flute music just really gets you going. You just absolutely love when somebody's playing the flute. And so all of a sudden you're talking with your friends, you just hear this like absolute slapper of a flute song being laid down behind you. You're like, oh my God, I'm done. I'm done with this conversation. I'm over it. I don't want to listen to you because I just love flutes so much, and it like pulls you away. Going back again to like cartoons, you can think about in cartoons they'll have somebody like in a conversation, they'll get a smell of something, and the smell like actually carries them away to the thing. That's sort of what Aristotle's getting at here. The other example that he gives I like also because I think it's relatable is, so in the very next section, paragraph 4, on that same page, he says, the same is true in other cases also. Hence, if we are enjoying one thing intensely, we do not do another very much. It is when we are only mildly pleased that we do something else. For instance, people who eat nuts in theaters do this most when the actors are bad. So think about when you go to the movies. Right? When do you do the most snacking? Usually at the beginning of the movie when everything is just getting geared up. Once the movie gets really good, you like have to move the food away from you and set it down and be like, oh my God, okay, I'm really into this, right? Or you nervously eat because it's just like something to do. But yeah, so the idea is just that alien pleasures, if you get distracted by a pleasure proper to some other activity, it pulls you towards it. And in this way, he says alien pleasures are like proper pains. So a proper pain would be something like if you had really bad knees, and you run, and it feels bad to run because you have bad knees. So what should you do if your knees hurt every time you run? What do you think? What's that?
Keep running.
No, Aristotle thinks exactly not that, right? The proper pain, because the idea is just not that your knees hurt because you haven't been running. Your knees hurt because there's actually something wrong with your knees, right? It's a proper pain. It's a pain you ought to be experiencing because it's trying to tell you something. It's saying, hey, dummy, go to the pool and swim for your cardio. Get on a bike or something. Stop running because I can't handle this. And I think Aristotle also is thinking here that doing bad feels bad, right? It feels bad to do bad things. That's a proper pain. And it gives us an indicator that, hey, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. And if you are receiving pleasure from doing bad things, you gotta change. You gotta do something different. Okay. Well, any questions at this point? You guys have a fairly good sense of what Aristotle's up to here with pleasure? So the last thing that he talks about, he says, okay, so we've been talking about happiness, and happiness is something that we choose for itself. But something else that people choose for itself are what he calls petty amusements. So these are things like, and you can think about if you like these things, how many people like to watch Netflix? How many people like to scroll on their phone? Yeah, I love these things. Netflix scrolling, video games, right? Board games, recreational sports, all of these sorts of things fall under this idea of petty amusements. And what Aristotle says is, he says, we look out in the world, and there's children, and there's people with power, namely tyrants, right? People with absolute power, who choose this life, right? And they choose it for itself. They choose to pursue a life where all they do are petty amusements. Maybe, right, this is the life that, like, Instagram celebrities try to make it seem like they live. Right, the Instagram celebrity doesn't show you any of the work that they do. They're just like, oh my god, I'm on the beach, I'm scrolling, right, watching Netflix, I'm doing all these things. Because this is something that seems to be chosen for itself. It seems to be choice-worthy, these petty amusements. But, Aristotle says, we've gotten it wrong if we're following tyrants and children in the types of lives that they lead. Who should be our example? Not tyrants and children. Who do we look to guide us as we try to live the best life?
The most virtuous people.
Yeah, excellent people, right? People who are already happy. People who are already living this excellent life, this life of flourishing, right? We don't look to these other people. And so what Aristotle says is this isn't the best life, but it is important. So think about you're doing your work for school, right? You're really busy and it's hard. You need to take a break. What do you do when you take a break? You scroll, you watch Netflix, you play video games, you go to recreational sports, and that's good. Aristotle says that these petty amusements are necessary because it allows us to rest, relax, and get ready for further activity. Right? It cures something in us. It cures this inability that we have to constantly be working. We have to take breaks, and those breaks need to be filled with stuff that feels good. Right? We can't just take breaks to do stuff that feels bad. I can't stop working constantly to go just keep working constantly because my work is going to suffer from this. There's actually places like Google and other big companies are actually starting to disincentivize multitasking for exactly this reason. That productivity skyrockets the less you have people do. Right? If you have them really focused and be able to take breaks, incorporate things like meditation, proper sleep schedules, good eating, right? All these things that Amazon and Google and they're trying to do by building these huge campuses, it's all geared towards this sort of thing where we're allowing people to rest in a pleasurable way that gets them ready to do more. Okay, so that then is our discussion of pleasure. John.
Sounds like there's actually some like trait associated with virtue as far as like how much time you spend in petty amusements. Like there can be a median state for petty amusements. Like somebody who just scrolls on their phone all day long is going to be super unhappy, and they're in the excessive amount of petty amusement. And then there's somebody it's possible to be deficient too, and like never take breaks, and you just have a heart attack at age 50 because you're building a business.
Right. No, I think this is a great point. I hadn't actually thought about it in terms of the intermediate state, but I think that's exactly right. right? We need this. Think about somebody you know who's like, oh, I don't have a phone, I don't get on the online, right? Netflix, I don't do that, I don't do anything, I just work, right? Or like your grandparents or older people who like to pretend that everything they've ever done is work. They're like, I've never had fun ever, just been working nonstop. It's like, no, you weren't, you did tons of stuff that was fun. Or you're not happy, right? You're not an excellent person without being able to do this. I think you're exactly right. There's a balance there. And also there's a lot of studies now about how if you spend too much time doing these things, it does make you depressed, right? If you lay in bed and watch Netflix all the time, you're gonna feel bad. It feels bad to not do any work or activity in that sort of way. I think that's a great point. Other just questions or comments before we move on to talk about contemplation here in the class? Is this making sense in terms of pleasure? Okay, so this last point then that we were talking about is we don't want to look to tyrants or children or these sorts of people because they're not the excellent people, right? There are people out there who are already happy, and we look to them as our guide for how to develop these virtues of character. Right? These ways that we make our whole soul work together. But Aristotle says this is an analogy that we can use to think about what would be the best activity for a human life. Right? What is the best thing for us to do? We've already talked about this somewhat, right? We talked about with book 1, we're focused on the function, this activity that's most proper to us, right? We have the example of like the racehorse. What's proper to a racehorse is to win races and be fast. What's proper to a human being is what? What's the activity most proper to us? Like contemplation. Contemplation, right? Remember, the first formulation of our function that Aristotle gives is a life of activity in accord with reason, or with reason taking the lead, right? Life of activity with reason taking the lead. And reason takes the lead because it's the best part of our soul. Just like the excellent people, the happy people, the people who excel, take the lead in the virtues of sort of society and the polis as a whole, if we take that down to the individual level, that which takes the lead is the part of us that's the best, which is our ability to reason, our ability to think, right? Our ability to understand and move through the world in an understanding way. So I want to pause here for a second, because what Aristotle ends up looking at is he says, is the best activity the life of contemplation? Right? The contemplative life, the philosophical life. Now what he means here is decidedly Greek and is not something that maybe is as common to our way of thinking about philosophy. So when we think about philosophy, I think we tend to think about like what I'm doing, right? Academic philosophy, somebody who's in a university, they do research, that or they're like, I don't know, some weirdo in town who calls himself a philosopher and says a lot of weird stuff. That might actually still be the case for the Greeks. But, right, we have to think about philosophy as this literal sense of the love of wisdom, right? Philosophy as this activity to engage in. Not a set of beliefs, not merely an academic discipline, right? Hopefully the academic discipline is sort of a subset of this larger version of the love of wisdom. Or we can think about it just as philosophy as a way of life. Right? Philosophy is a way that you direct yourself towards the world. And what this means, right? Think about love for a second. When you love something, there's some object of your love. What do you try to do for that object of your love? You guys don't love? No love in the room at all? Just shut it down. You guys are like the work robots. They're trying to, no petty amusements, no love. You're going to be the grandparent who's like, you're lucky that you have this virtual reality to go play in because I just didn't love anything. I just had fun or I had no fun, etc. No, seriously though. What's something that you love and what do you do for it? Courtney, what do you do when you love something?
You take care of it.
You take care of it, right? You try to nurture it. Try to make sure that it has the things that you need. What else do? Do you go after it? You do it for the most part, right? Love incorporates this sense of desire, right? And desire is this motivating principle that makes you want to go get it, right? When you really love something, you don't just let it sit there and don't interact with it at all, right? You try to be around it. You try to chase after it, right? You try to do whatever you can to spend your life with it. So this life of loving wisdom, philosophy as a way of life, is a way of comporting yourself towards the world such that you're going after wisdom, right? You're seeking knowledge of the world, the way the world works, right? And knowledge in the sense of trying to hit upon the truth. You can think about this in some sense through the distinction of curiosity and wonder. Right? The life of curiosity is not the philosophical life. Curiosity bounces us from thing to thing, right? We get a little bit of a surface grasp of it, and then we're on to the next thing. Right? We're a little bit curious, and we're like, oh, I kind of want to know about this book. Oh, bored. On to the next thing. Oh, how do water bottles work? Don't really care. What's this with the document thing? Oh, I'm satisfied. Right? And you keep going back and forth. It's a sort of shallow type of feeling. Wonder makes you really want to figure something out, right? Think about something in your life that you couldn't stop investigating, right? That you couldn't bring yourself to stop thinking about, wondering about, trying to figure out what is true, right? What is the case? This is what's meant by the philosophical life, right? It's not just engaging in academic philosophy and writing papers, or even necessarily reading philosophy books, although this is helpful because there's people who've done it before who can help guide us. But you can do it mostly on your own as just a way that you comport yourself towards the world. That's what Aristotle means when he's talking about a life of contemplation or the life of study here. Right? This life of pursuing wisdom, loving wisdom, and directing yourself towards the world through wonder. Right? Really trying to figure things out and develop an understanding of the way the world works. Now, Aristotle says, okay, well, how can we figure out if maybe this is the best life? Well, we already, through all of our various discussions, have some different qualities that would belong to the life or the activity that is the best. Right? We know that whatever is most continuous would be best, right? Something that we can engage in continuously without breaking would be better than things that we can only do for a short amount of time. We know for Aristotle that whatever is the most pleasurable is the most complete, right? If pleasure completes the activity, whatever is the most pleasurable will be the most complete. We also have talked about, through the politics and justice and these other things, whatever is the most self-sufficient will be best. And finally, whatever is the most intrinsic, right? That activity chosen for itself and not for some instrumental reason. Okay, now Aristotle thinks you can give an account where contemplation fulfills each of these requirements, right? So think about thinking, this life of loving wisdom. This is something that's leisurely and unwearied, right? It's not like other types of work. It might sometimes get a little tough because we might not like the truths or the conclusions that we're coming across, but it's something that we can engage in with all of our other activities, right? It's a way to dispose yourself towards the world such that you can really be doing this pretty much all the time. You don't have to be taking breaks in the same way that you do from, say, grinding away in a lab, or being a professional athlete, or some sort of manual labor job, or doing finance, right? Looking at numbers all the time, trying to balance checkbooks and these sorts of things, right? It's more continuous than other sorts of activities. Not only that, but Aristotle thinks it's the most pleasurable, and he thinks this for two reasons. The first is because it's a pleasure without pain, and what he means by this is there's no excess. There's no point at which the pleasure from a philosophical life turns into too much. Right? Think about all the other bodily pleasures or the pleasures of the senses. There's a point that's too much. You can only listen to music so long. You can only look at art for so long. You can only eat so much. You can only drink so much. You can only feel so many things. There's a point at which all of those things turn into pain. They have an excessive point. Aristotle says, philosophy or this philosophical life is not like that. Not only that, but it has the best objects. Remember we said that the activity is most active when you have the best objects, right? What are philosophy's objects? True things, right? And true things are not ephemeral, right? They're not changing, they're not fleeting. They're things that are always there and are truly the best in the sense that they stand above the always changing and everyday world of values, right? That's why we have these unchanging truths of the world. Also, and this is really important, the philosophical life is the most self-sufficient. You don't need anything else to do it. Think about all of the other virtues, all of the virtues of character. You either need goods, so temperance, intemperance, all these things. You need food, drink, and sex so that you can cultivate your virtue in a way that it requires goods. Most of the other virtues require that something's gone wrong, right? To be brave, there has to be wars. To be generous and magnanimous, there has to be an unequal distribution of wealth. For all of these different things, something has to have gone wrong. That's not the case with this life of contemplation or this life of study. And finally, and I'll let you go just after a quick discussion of this, it's the most intrinsic. Now real quick, think about all the different activities that you engage in your life. There might be some that are intrinsic, but many of them are instrumental, right? We've done this before. Why are you in college? Instrumental reasons. Why are you getting a job? Instrumental reasons. Why do you want money? Instrumental reasons, right? All of these activities that you engage in are for something. Part of Aristotle's point here is that we need some activity that stops that never-ending chain of instrumentality, right? Why do you go to school to get a job? Why do you want a job so you can get money? Why do you want money so you can buy stuff? At what point will you have bought enough stuff? Maybe there is no point. Maybe there's no point at which you just keep going on this train of instrumental activities, and then all of a sudden what happens? What's the end of that train? It's the thing that happens to all of us.
Die.
You die. Wouldn't it suck if you only ever did instrumental things the whole time throughout, right? Disposing yourself towards the world in this way gives you something that's not good for some other reason. It's just good in itself, right? It's worthwhile for no other reason than just to do it. It's the equivalent of the full-grown adult's play, right? The thing that we can do for no reason other than itself, just like a kid goes out and plays for no reason other than to play. Okay, that then is the end of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. The last thing that I'll say, or I'll save it for Monday. We'll do the very last little nugget on Monday. So it's one last little thing. And remember, we'll read the Susan Moeller Ogan piece that will be on Blackboard for Monday. I'll post that right after that. Thanks, everybody. I hope you have a great weekend. Enjoy the nice weather. Do you want to check your now while I clean up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm meeting with my advisor today.
Okay. Okay.
Because I plan to switch my major, possibly something in the College of Liberal Arts.
Okay.
So I'm thinking about possibly law society, and like I didn't know if you knew anything about that.
No, actually. So law and society is one of the possible majors. What school or what department is that housed in? Is it poli-sci?
Under sociology.